Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for 2024's final edition of Penning the Past, Insights into San Diego's Historic Neighborhoods and Architecture. I'm Dean Glass, and I'm thrilled to welcome Leslie Hubbard Crawford, who will guide us through the rich history of Coronado, a unique coastal town that has captivated visitors and residents for over a century. Leslie, a proud Coronado resident for over 45 years, brings an authentic insider's perspective to her presentation today. In the late 1800s, visionary developers Elisha Babcock and H.L. Story turned their dreams into reality by establishing the iconic Hotel del Coronado, a retreat that has drawn wealthy and influential figures from around the world. Their legacy was furthered by John D. Spreckels, whose impact continues to shape Coronado's landscape. Surrounded by water and accessible only by ferry, the Silver Strand, or the iconic San Diego Coronado Bay Bridge, Coronado combines small-town charm, beach resort elegance, and a proud military history like nowhere else. Leslie will share captivating stories from Coronado's past, and we're delighted to have her with us. We hope her presentation sparks your own appreciation for Coronado's enduring charm and heritage. As always, if you have questions, please type them into the chat, and Leslie will address them at the end of the program. And now, please join me in welcoming Leslie as we explore the fascinating history of Coronado.
Good morning. Thank you, Dean. Nice introduction. I think I need to share my screen here before I get started anywhere. Let's see. Okay, and from the beginning. All right, there we go. Can everybody see? I'm hoping everyone can see this. It says my screen sharing is paused. So I'm hoping that
we're not seeing it.
You're not seeing
No.
it. Okay. Uh-oh. What does that mean? Even after our tech check, Dean.
Yep.
Let's try this one. Can you see that?
No.
Ugh.
It says you started screen sharing, but we're not seeing anything.
And my screen says screen paused, and I'm not sure why it would do that. Let's see. All right, let's try this again. Sorry, everybody. Thought we had the technical details worked out, and clearly not happening here. Oh, I'm screen sharing now, hopefully.
Oh, there you go. We see.
Yay, now. Okay. So thank you again for the introduction, Dean. And I actually need to update my bio a little bit because I've been here for almost 60 years in Coronado. I got here that's okay. I got here as a young Navy junior, and my dad retired here and we stayed. So I've been here for most of my life, and before that, every couple of years. So this is my home by all means. So I got started with my Arcadia journey. I had one book, and it was the postcards of Balboa Park. And I was so fascinated with it. And I was already collecting some postcards for Coronado. So I reached out to Arcadia and I said, I'm interested in doing this. And when they started explaining the criteria, I realized I didn't have nearly enough postcards. So I was thinking, okay, it's not going to happen. But they really wanted a book for Coronado. And so I ended up coming up with a proposal, getting accepted, and started the process of doing a book for Coronado, which was a huge learning curve for me because I was extremely naive about sources and what was out there. And it was a different time. Just in the last 10 years, so much has come up on the internet that wasn't there before. So even things like the microfiche that I studied at the library for days, I could be doing at home now. And same thing with the San Diego Archive, San Diego Union Archive. So it's a much easier process now, but it was a lot of fun and I learned a lot. The nice thing about Arcadia is, okay, hang on, I've got to figure out how to get my screen to move. There we go. The nice thing about doing a book with Arcadia is they give you criteria you have to follow. And as a first-time author, that was really helpful to me. I had to have a certain number of pictures, up to 250, but not less than 180. And I couldn't use all just postcards unless I was doing a postcard series, which I was not. So I really had to go out and source photos. And that turned out to be the hardest part of the book, which surprised me because I just figured, oh, I'll find the photos and then I'll write about them in the research. I'll do all the research. It'll be a lot of work. It was actually backwards. So it really kind of drove how I formatted the book initially. But I spent days at San Diego History Center looking at their photos at my local library, which had a good archive of photos, and also at our historical association here in Coronado. I had to write, the copy had to be within between 8 and 18,000 words. And by the time I ended up writing, I had 24,000. So I had to really cut it back, which was really, really hard because I wanted to be able to tell a story about each picture. What you're seeing right now is an example of a page in the book. So everything had to be formatted in a certain way by the publisher. They had a formula. And so I was following that. And that really helped me stay on track. Otherwise, I think I'd be still working on the book. So a lot of research at the library, doing the microfiche. And that ended up being a lot of fun. And these are just little tidbits of things that I found while researching that I didn't end up using. But it really gives you a kind of a overview of all the weird things that you find in research that kind of put another piece of the puzzle into the history. So just, on the left here, the Fitches are home. Walter Fitch and his wife owned a huge mansion on Ocean Boulevard, which still exists. And then just talks about their week's vacation with their friends on their ranch in Tucson. This is how the very wealthy lived. Down below, 7500C parade. That was back in the 40s, I think. This is the parade before the flower show. We no longer have a parade before our flower show, but our flower show has been going for over 100 years. And that's a big testament to the longevity of some of the things that really are important to people in Coronado. So that's a big one. Old glass eyes needed. I thought this was very interesting. I also found an article about glass eyes. Somebody found one in the movie theater and they posted in the newspaper about finding this glass eye. Who did it belong to? I mean, I've got so many questions, but just interesting tidbits about that. And then also the article on the right is talking about a man who flew back from Hawaii, Navy, and just, ended up crashing off the beach of the Strand, but he was okay. But it just, there's a lot of variations of history in Coronado, from the wealthy to the military and then everything in between there. So I have so many things that didn't make it into the book that I still read and think, oh, I got to find a place for that. So here, you just got to see a little bit of that right now. By the time I got done sourcing all my pictures, I was able to come up with a pretty good framework of how I wanted to format the book. And so these are the chapters in the book, and we'll go through these as we go through the talk. It helped me organize my talk as well. So Coronado's early years. I was really amazed at the foresight of the men who had this vision for Coronado. They weren't the first ones that had the vision for a big hotel, but they were the ones who worked the fastest to buy the land. And I didn't realize that for a long time. But again, in my researching, something came to the surface that I, didn't make sense at first. And the more I got into it, I realized, oh, okay, these guys were all vying for money-making propositions and looking at new land. And San Diego was, on the map now. And Coronado was just a peninsula where people hunted rabbits and quail, but all of a sudden somebody had a vision, and that was Babcock and his friend Hampton Story, Elisha Babcock and Hampton Story. So they got the money together, bought the island, came up with a plan, and here you're looking at and this is how we still live today. It just makes a lot of sense, and it's a grid pattern for the most part, but diagonal streets to get you across town faster, and it was just a good plan for the long run. They started with a blank slate, and Coronado was just covered with scrub and manzanita and yuccas, and so they really had to be very good visionaries about what it is they wanted. But this is what it looked like when you first got to Coronado. The first building that was built was actually the boathouse, which still exists. This picture you can see, let's see, I'll put my marker there. The boathouse is here. This is Stingray Point in the golf course of Coronado. It used to have a swim house on the side here where people dressed, or the bathhouse. And it used to be out a pier, at the end of a pier. It got moved in, I think, I think it was 72, when they actually lifted the whole boathouse up and brought it into the shoreline. I also love this picture because this is after the hotel is also built, and you can tell where the vantage point was taken, where this picture was taken from up in the Hotel Del. But over here on this side is the smokestack that still exists. It's been retrofitted so it won't fall, hopefully, in an earthquake. I think it's very safe and stable. But this smokestack was ran off the powerhouse. Provided the smokestack and the powerhouse provided all the power to Coronado, all of Coronado, till 1922. But look at the smoke coming out of there. That's always kind of, yeah, it probably did that for years and years and years. So again, the blank slate, they had to create roads. They paved some, but most of them were dirt for a while. They had a trolley that ran all the way through the center of town, right down the mid block, the center of Orange Avenue, excuse me. And this is how people got from the ferry to the hotel. That was the whole point, was to get people to the hotel. And I just can only imagine what it was like to get off that ferry and just see the magic of this gigantic building at the end of the track. Because there wasn't much built in Coronado. You could see all the way across Coronado at the time, with a few houses here and there, scattered here and there. The initial building was done by many Chinese, and they were the ones, they had the numbers that they could find that had construction experience. And so there were tents littered all over Coronado, and that's how a lot of people lived, the workmen working on the hotel day and night. They had tall lights that lit up areas, and they just worked endlessly to get this hotel built. So it was marketed all over the nation, and this was a big deal. The train was now coming out, so it was easier for people to travel and get across country in a way that was not possible before. Before it was covered wagon, and that was really hard trek. So marketing was done all over the United States, and was done well. I have to say, I think I was surprised. I just thought, 100 years ago, what did they know? What could they do? Well, they were smart. They did a lot, and a lot more than I really imagined at the time. So the other thing they were developing was something called Coronado Heights. And this was at the end of the Silver Strand down by Imperial Beach. So this would be the Silver Strand. Imperial Beach is over here. This is now the U.S. Navy SEALs campus. But up until maybe 10 years ago, the train tracks still rolled through here, right through the middle. And then they went down the Strand, and that was the other way you could get to Coronado, by train, which a lot of wealthy people came in their own train cars. So Coronado Heights really never got off the ground. Things were sold furiously in Coronado and for Coronado Heights, but by within a couple of years of 1880, I think 86 is when they had the first auction, the economy tanked, and so a lot of people just gave up their properties because they couldn't pay the taxes. So this was a dream, and it would have been beautiful, but it never happened. The Hotel Del. So here it is. It's just an amazing piece of construction. And even today, I mean, a lot of work is being done on it right now. They needed to do some serious structural integrity work, just because it is so old, and things change over time, and remodeling happens, and something happens during the remodeling. So it just really, they're bringing it back so that it will last another 200 years, hopefully. And it is just an amazing piece of history that sits on our beach, and really is a big part of Coronado's legacy. That's what brought Coronado, that's what made Coronado. So we are proud of it and love that it's still here. And it is just a fantastic thing to see coming over the bridge. Again, marketed heavily. And so I love this postcard with the shells. Very much a place of high society at the Hotel Del. So tea parties and socials, and very wealthy people. Wealthy people also lived in Coronado. They didn't just visit, but the wealthy people who visited, a lot of them came to stay for a whole season. And so they would bring their kids, bring the whole family set up with the nannies and the help, and then just live on the beach here and have a wonderful time. They played polo. you can see down here, was big for about 40 years. And that was over on North Island side of Coronado. That was called the Polo Fields and the Country Club, which is now Country Club Estates, which is all housing in Coronado on the west side. Fishing was big, and that a lot of people went out on fishing excursions. Horseback riding on the beach. I mean, how cool is that? So, and then the water sports and the aquaplaning. So all these things, these 2 pages came out of a brochure that was used for marketing as well. And the fishing, as I said, that was something that was a big sport for people, but also, they ate what they caught at the hotel. So here's a list of what was available on March 13th, 1903, and the temperature was 62 degrees. And so this was the fish that was caught and that was available in the restaurant. Okay, sorry, trying to get it forward here. Okay, well, I'll keep talking until I can get it to unfreeze. The Coronado Islands were a destination. Okay, sorry. There we go. If you were visiting or you lived in town, one of the early things that was developed in Coronado was the ostrich farm. And this was a big thing because all the women needed feathers for their hats, and it was an industry. So we had an ostrich farm in Coronado, and I love the old stories. It talks about, I think it was this gentleman here, having to run for the bushes or things. The ostriches were not nice. So there was always an adventure at the ostrich farm, but very much a sideshow for people to come look at. Coronado Islands were another destination, and they'd go out and have fishing, but also go out and look at the wildlife. I mean, when you think about where most of these people came from, the East Coast, this was just the Wild West, and everything was new, and the animals were interesting. And the one thing I think is really interesting that I have not found is in the early years, nobody talked about whale watching. So one, the whales had been hunted to near extinction, the gray whales, but 2, I guess they just didn't look at it in the same way. But they talk a lot about the bird life and the sea lions, but I don't really find much in my research about whales. So I think that's very interesting. And then the Hotel Del, when families would come with the kids, they had a beach school right on the beach. You can see my cursor here. And they learned French, they learned how to dance, and then they learned studies as well. I've met a couple older people who no longer are alive who went to the beach school, and they said it was very proper, and their parents were wealthy and lived here in town. So here they are on the beach, saluting the flag in the morning, but I just think that's such a wondrous thing. We should all go to beach school. The Hotel Del was a huge undertaking by Babcock and Story, but they eventually had to hand over the reins to John Spreckels. John Spreckels was up in San Francisco, but came down often on his boat and loved it here. And he ended up buying out all of the companies, the beach company, the ferry company, all of that from Babcock and Story over time. That's a rough overview, but he ended up being in charge, and he saved the Hotel Del because it was just a losing money proposition. And it needed somebody who could really come in here and do it justice, take care of things, spend the money. After the earthquake in San Francisco, he moved down here permanently. His residence is now the Glorieta Bay Inn in Coronado, right across from the Hotel Del. But this was his house, and the basic structure still stands. The lobby's here, and some of the rooms are up here in Spreckels' house of the existing hotel now. And he had a tunnel that he could walk through to get to the Hotel Del, so he didn't have to walk past all the people on the street. If he didn't want to, he could get over there quickly. So John Spreckels left a legacy in San Diego. I mean, he's done so much to make what we have, put things in existence that we still have today. So we all owe him a debt of gratitude. He got smart and started up Tent City, and that was another way to bring income into Coronado and to the hotel. So you could stay at Tent City. This opened in 1900, June of 1900. You could stay at Tent City for $4.50 a week, where in contrast to the Hotel Del, which would be maybe $4 a day. So it was a big boon for people to come out and just, again, camping on the beach. It it looks a little rough, but I think they had the niceties in town, and they also had music and billiard parlors and things to do for everybody and beach time. So it was this was probably in its early stages because the trees are very small, but you can see where the boathouse is, and you can see all the tents in the background, and then all the public buildings. So the pavilion and the music pavilion and the restaurants and things like that are in the background. From the air, this is a better view of it, and this was probably taken in the 20s. The trees are a little bit bigger, and things have changed a bit. Spreckels Mansion is up here on the hill, so he can see everything. He can see his hotel, and he can see Tent City and Glorieta Bay. Of course, the beach was the big place to go, and everybody showed up with typically no bathing suits because people didn't own bathing suits. Swimming wasn't really a thing back then. I mean, you think about it, we just take it for granted now, but most of the bathing suits you see here were rented bathing suits. They were wool. When they were wet, they got heavy. Most people didn't know how to swim, so there was a rope typically from the beach out to about 10 feet on a weight so that people could hold onto the rope and go out over their head if they were brave enough. But I imagine it was kind of wet, woolly, smelly, seaweedy beach smell. and just the fact that people are like this woman with her bare arms. I mean, that was just such a novelty, I think, for most people. People came, and the postcard on the upper left, you can see people are dressed. I mean, I'm thinking I'd be so hot all the time. This man's in a suit. They're back there with all these heavy dresses on. But this was what they did. They came and they lived a life at Tent City that they couldn't do in other places, and it was just such a novelty. So you can see there was a road that went along the beachfront, and people gathered on the beach to just sit and watch. And then also the ladies in front of their tent here. So palm leaves were the roofs for most of them. And I think over time, some of them were built with wood, versus just the canvas tents. So they had more permanent structures there throughout the year. Swimming and water sports was a big pastime. So they had sailing, and then this was in Glorieta Bay, the swimming races. Or swimming races. They had a big pool that they called Spreckels bathtub that wasn't very deep. And so that was a big gathering place for during the day when the weather was hot. And then they had music every day. So this was the stage over here, and people would sit in the shade over here underneath this shade structure and listen to concerts. So that was very much an event that happened. And there was a schedule that came out for Tent City every day or once a week, and described all the things that were happening that week, including the music performers. And then I love this picture. Here are the ladies on the beach. I mean, this could be today. So things haven't changed that much in terms of what we love to do here and how we do it. All right. One of the things that started in the very earliest years were the ferries. So we needed a ferry to get across to Coronado. And from the very beginning, they had ferries. And the ferries ran until 1969. There was a fee for the ferry, and we eventually had books that we could carry in our car. But it was very much an event. And as a little girl, I remember riding the ferries, and just it was always an event, and I loved it. So you'd be coming back to Coronado and drive off, and you'd be home. But sooner or later, there was too much congestion, and the ferries just weren't going to serve the needs of the town. These are some other old pictures, and the station that was probably gone by the time I moved here in 1966, but it was a big, big ferry station. And this is looking from the San Diego side toward Coronado. So you could see the Hotel Del in the background. So again, a destination and just a viewpoint and an experience for the first time people coming must have been amazing. And the very first ferry that ran here was the Ramona. So that was a this bottom one here. And in the 1960s, it was decided that a bridge would be built and that the ferries would cease to exist as soon as the bridge was opened. I love this picture because you're standing on one ferry, you're looking at another ferry, and there's downtown, and there's the El Cortez. So times have changed a lot, and our skyline doesn't look like that anymore. But I very clearly, I don't know if you can see it, but there are palm trees all along the water here on the San Diego side, and that was just one of those landmarks that you always watch for when you were going across. So one of the other nice things about Coronado in the early years is we had Japanese tea gardens. We had one down by Sunset Park, down by North Island, the earliest one. And then eventually there was a big storm in 1906 that washed it out. So they moved it over behind the Spreckels mansion because John Spreckels owned an entire block behind his mansion, and they recreated it there. So it's just a place that was a very the niceties, you know, it's just the Japanese culture was very fine and was revered by people in the Victorian era. And so it was just a beautiful place to walk. I'm not sure it was a place for the residents to hang out in. I think it was more for the wealthy, but it just was something that was very much a part of Coronado for decades. They had tea services, and it just was very proper. A lot of these things were brought over from Japan. This was built by Mr. Marsh, who also did the Japanese tea garden up in San Francisco. So, but you can see how close it was. John Spreckels' house here would be right over here on this side, and all the gardens were behind, but there's the Hotel Del in the background. All right, on to North Island and the military. North Island was owned by John Spreckels. He owned all of Coronado, North and South Island. But in 1910, a man named Glenn Curtis entered into a contract with John Spreckels to teach flying to the Navy here. So before that, it was agricultural land for the hotel, and they would grow potatoes and have a surplus that they'd ship to San Francisco. It was an agricultural ground, and then it was also a hunting ground for rabbits and quail for guests at the Hotel Del on horseback. And then here we have cattle in the foreground. So it changed quite a bit once the Navy came in. And then right behind the Navy, the Army came in. So for years until 1935, the North Island was split. The Navy was over here, and it was called Naval Air Station San Diego. And then the Army was over here, and that was Rockwell Field. And there was a causeway that came across from Coronado. This is called the Spanish Bight. And then ships could kind of anchor out here in protection. This is where they used to fly the seaplanes. So it was just a very upwardly growing industry in Coronado, the military. So this was a great old picture I found. And it just sort of, I love that somebody wrote all these things on here so you can get a good idea of how people lived back then. Here's a view from Point Loma, and it's looking across Rockwell Field. This is actually a circle that was their landing field. And there are old pictures of Lindbergh Field that have the same thing. So I guess it just was the way they landed planes then, with whatever direction the air was coming. A lot of records were set here: highest altitude flown, first air refueling, parachutes. The list goes on. And it just, there's an early time where it seemed like every 5 days in the paper, there was another new record set because nobody had ever done it before. So of course you can set a record. So here's the postcard for it from the 40s, Naval Air Station, San Diego. Ships out in the harbor. This was long before 32nd Street, which didn't come along until the 40s. This was after the World War I ended, and they had a flyover. And this was, you can see people all over the roofs downtown of the buildings. So this was just, this must have been amazing to see. And the sound, I can just hear it. Lindbergh Field was named after John Lindbergh, sorry, having a moment. But he took off for his flight to Europe from North Island. So this is where he started his flight to over to France. Gosh, I'm hoping I'm not messing all my facts up. So just disregard anything I said that was wrong there. I'm having a moment in my head here that I'm not keeping up. Okay, so here's the first air refueling that happened over North Island. Just some more postcards. As North Island grew, and in 1935, when the Army was asked to leave, North Island kept growing. These buildings were built in 1919 and are still there. This was the administration building, and you can see the tower here. This is a historic district on North Island, so they've protected those, and they still exist, and they're pretty amazing to walk through. So just a nice little tidbit about preservation, which I love. Here's a plane flying over Coronado, and then the Spanish Bight, and North Island is over here. So, and then ships just offshore. Okay, Spanish Bight. In the 1940s, this was filled in, and so that's what created one contiguous piece of land. And now all that belongs to the Navy. And they also expanded out this way too. So it's a little more of a square than the original shape. And then in the 40s, also Naval Amphibious Base was developed over on the south side of Coronado. And this was for the amphibious forces because they had just, we're in World War II, and this is the kind of fighting that they did. So this is how things started at NAB, Naval Amphibious Base. And this is practicing off the beach. And then later, the SEALs came in the 60s, and the BUDS trainees still train. We still see them on the beach occasionally. They keep us at a distance, the instructors do, but it's really amazing to just watch these guys running down the beach, knowing how hard that training is. Okay, I'm going into kind of a blast through the past of Coronado. Here's another picture from the air, and I love this picture because it also is a postcard that I had collected first. And then the photographer of this picture is a man named Harold Taylor, who was a prominent photographer in Coronado. He also took some of the first iconic photos of Yosemite back in the very, beginning of the century before he moved to Coronado. And then he also started the flower show, and I love the flower show. I chaired it for many years and have entered the flower show for probably 55 years of my 65 years of life. So I'm just, I love this picture just because it represents so many things to me. And you can see the beach school is right down here. And I'm sorry we still don't have a pier because that would really be a lot of fun. But as we know, piers don't last forever, and everybody else in San Diego is having troubles with theirs. So we had one once, and probably will never again. But this is the quay wall that comes out that is still there, not quite as long, probably comes to about here. The pier that they built with the rocks. And there was a pier that came out here, and this is how they brought people from ships, the Navy ships that were anchored offshore, would come to the end of the pier to come in and come to shore duty. Here's the boathouse again. The original yacht club was in this boathouse, but it has since morphed a few times. And now the yacht club is in this boathouse, which still exists. It's hopefully going to be built soon, but this was some old Navy waves. They had housing over on the bay side of Coronado, which was this was barged over from First Street on the bay side, and this still is our clubhouse now. So it's aged and still there, and built quite a bit more built around. The bottom building here was our old city hall. Our new city hall is built in the same place, but again, these were very old buildings for years, and things have changed quite a bit. I love these pictures. This is my friend Susie Heap, and Susie still lives here. She grew up, she lived in Coronado. Her dad was in the military. They lived in a house that she still lives in on First Street. She rode her horse Honey, and she shared her pictures with me. There was a stable at 4th and Alameda right at the entrance to North Island for years, and that's where the polo grounds were and the country club originally. And Susie's horse was there. Her horse's name was Honey. But just the idea of riding the horse on the beach and riding all the way around past the golf course on the bay and Glorieta Bay and the bay, San Diego Bay, just was just sounds like heaven to me. So beautiful pictures here. Okay, going into later on in the 60s, as I said earlier, the Coronado Bridge was talked about, and it actually had been talked about for a lot of years, probably, well, actually back to the 1920s. John Spreckels first proposed a bridge. So there had been multiple studies done through the years, and they'd actually talked of doing tunnels under San Diego Bay as well. But eventually the decision was made to build the bridge. And this is a picture of a memorial, a piece of memorabilia from the last day of the ferries. These are the last ferries that went across the bay, Coronado. And the last ferry that went over right before midnight on August 2nd went over, and at midnight on August 3rd, the Coronado Bridge opened, and that's what we use now. So here's a photo of the bridge in construction. The golf course had to be moved around a bit because they needed to have this entranceway because the golf course used to go beyond that. But it is our source of transportation, and good or bad, it is very special to come over the bridge, to come back home, and there's Coronado laid out in front of you, and I love that. But I do miss the ferries, and I do remember them as a little girl, and I remember as a little girl thinking it was going to change everything, and it did, to have this bridge come in, and then the amount of traffic that ended up arriving even in the first year was, I think, at least double and maybe triple what they had projected. So, if you talk to the older people who lived here then, there's conversation about, the strong arming up in Sacramento by the developers to get this built. And I think eventually we were going to need to do something, because the ferries were just, by the time I was a little girl and living there, the ferries, we'd wait for an hour to get on a ferry. The traffic would be backed up down Orange Avenue. So it was just not becoming, it was unrealistic to think the ferries could continue to carry that load, and the bridge had to come in. So here's my view over to Coronado, the early days. This is all Tidelands Park now, but this was Navy housing originally. And then they developed all into Navy housing. Coronado Hospital is here, and then our golf course is here. So, and the hotel is way over there, but we can see it all coming over the bridge. With the bridge, also, the Coronado Shores were built about the same time, starting in 1970, and also the Coronado Cays. So all these things were kind of happening at the same time, and Coronado was going through a big shift. We still ride a ferry. It's just not with our cars, but it is still a beautiful way to get back and forth across the island. I love walking the sidewalks because somebody early on realized that they needed to save these sidewalk stamps while they were fixing and repairing sidewalks. So these are really a interesting walk through history, some of them. I realized that if I go to San Diego, I won't find these same, I haven't seen these in San Diego, these same companies. So there must have been a bunch of people doing concrete work, because there was so much concrete work that needed to be done all over San Diego. But most of the sidewalks in Coronado are dated between 1910 and 1915. And I realized that that was getting ready for the exposition in Balboa Park, just the bringing things up to looking better for the public who was getting ready to come. So, and then, oops, sorry, this is our oldest one, 1898, and this is over in front of, on Ocean Boulevard, in front of the Spreckels mansion that was owned by Klaus Spreckels. So, history there. And then the Silver Strand, this was where Tent City was. This is in the 40s now. The amphibious base has been built, dredged and built. All of this is now City Hall, the swimming pool. The Boathouse restaurant is just off the picture here. The palm trees that were so iconic when I was a little girl are pretty much all gone on the beach now, but this was kind of the dividing line for the hotel's beach and the city beach. All this has changed, and the city, the Coastal Commission has come in and or taken back or whatever, but this was the delineation at the time for the hotel property. We've lost a lot of historic buildings. this church no longer exists. We have another one that looks like it, the Presbyterian Church, but this was the old Methodist church. This church is still standing, the Episcopal Church, stone quarried from Sweetwater. The windows are Tiffany. Just really amazing features in this beautiful old building that still stands on the corner, and we still hear the church bells occasionally. This big old house was owned by Madame Schumann Heink. She was an opera singer, world-renowned opera singer, and she lived here, and she had a house on a mountaintop, on a hilltop out in Grossmont as well. She traveled the world, but she loved Coronado. This house was built by Harrison Albright, who also built John Spreckels' mansion. Albright was he was renowned for his strong concrete building. Because of the earthquake, John Spreckels wanted to know that he was never going to have a house collapse again. So this was built by John Spreckels' attorney, who owned this property originally, who then sold it to Madame Schumann Heink, lived here for years. This was on the corner of 8th and Orange. When it was sold after her death, they tried to figure out how to move it, but it was concrete and it was just simply too heavy. So it had to be torn down, which was really a shame. I've seen pictures of it, and just, here's her roof deck, and she looked out over Coronado and could see the Hotel Del, and just the breezes. That's the way I would love to live in Coronado. This house in Coronado still exists. The front yard was originally landscaped by Kate Sessions. This is over on Glorietta Boulevard. Was designed by, get my architects all confused. Johnson, William Templeton Johnson. We've got architects, buildings built by Gill, Hubbard, Requa, Albright, Johnson, and other architects as well. But just wealthy people came here. They wanted to spend the money, and these guys were all renowned. So this is an incredible house. This apartment building still exists. Mission Apartments, still there. You can hardly see them. They're so in the front, the bushes and trees are so high, but the building still exists. And then this is the Hotel Biltmore, now known as Hotel Marisol. And it has been a little motel for years, and it's been brought back and refurbished beautifully. So we've saved some of our iconic architecture here, and it's nice to have these things because I think it keeps Coronado grounded instead of turning us into just every other place. So having said all of that, Coronado's changed a lot, but the basic premise of why we live here is still here. I mean, the Hotel Del is the grand dome and on the beach there, and I can walk the beach and still find sand dollars, and I imagine people finding these sand dollars 120 years ago on the beach. Watch the sunrises and the sunsets. Not much has changed in terms of just what you can see as you walk around town. It still has a wonderful feel. It has an interesting demographic now. It's very wealthy, the military, longtime residents, vacationers. I think this is like no other place, especially with the military. We're surrounded on both sides. And typically a military town has a lot of strip malls and things right outside the front gate, but that's not Coronado. Coronado, it's residential as soon as you get outside the front gate of North Island. So it's just a very interesting, and I think diverse in its way, population that keeps this grounded and keeps us very unique in our way. This is one of my favorite postcards. You can see the old house on Ocean Boulevard. This was before the rock wall, this was after the rock wall went up, because we had a big storm in 1905 that washed out the Japanese tea garden, that also washed out the road on Ocean Boulevard. And so the rock wall went up, and it was quarried out in Sweetwater, and built by H.G. Fenton, which is a company that still exists today. Eventually, the jetty that was built on North Island, in conjunction with the ocean currents, push sand onto Coronado. So now we have a nice big sandy beach. We didn't always have that, as you can see in this postcard. But there is the Hotel Del, shining brightly, always. And so let me think. I think that concludes my talk for the most part. I'm sure I missed things, but I know we're going to have questions. Again, here's another picture of people on the beach, and there's the hotel in the background, and I still can see this view, minus the sailing ship, although once in a while the star video will go out and we can get a shot of that. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Leslie. That was great. Very
Okay. Do
informative.
you want me to unshare my screen, Dean? Or do
Yeah,
you want me
that
to
would
leave
be
this?
fine.
Okay.
And okay, we have a couple questions. Let's start with this one. The Crown Colony chapter of the Colonial Dame 17th century was named for Coronado due to the founder, Mrs. Edwin A. Snyder, living there. Do you know anything about her family?
I know nothing about that.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh,
More research.
maybe another book.
Okay.
And do you recommend visiting the Coronado Historical Association for more history?
Absolutely. We are very fortunate in Coronado. We have a thriving historical organization. A lot of things are online, so you can go to their website and look at, I think it's 11,000 images online. If you're researching something in particular, you can call there, and the archivist, Vicki Stone, will set you up and for a time to come and do some research if you need that and find what you need. We also have a Coronado Public Library has a very large collection of historical artifacts and memorabilia and ephemera. And I actually have my postcard collection it is a collection at the library, the
Great.
Leslie Crawford collection. So you can go look at that. But they have a ton of stuff and they're very helpful as well. And then also the Hotel Del. Gina Petrone is the heritage manager at the Hotel Del, and she's fantastic. And and the three organizations actually work together quite a bit. So I love that there's a lot of collaboration, and that we really have a good overall history collection here. So yes, but the CHA is well worth visiting, and their exhibits are always great.
Oh, great. Do you have any knowledge of the trolley that used to go through Coronado on Orange Avenue?
Yes, so there was one trolley that went from the ferry to the hotel, and then it stopped at the hotel because there used to be a hill. There is a hill still there, but the road that now goes down that hill to the Silver Strand Highway didn't exist before. And you'd have to go kind of through the hotel grounds, and then they had what they called Dead Man's Curve, which was a 90-degree turn to get down, and it was a rough road past the stables for the hotel. So they had the trolley that went from the ferry landing to the hotel, and then at the bottom of the hotel, down where the boathouse is, was the other train line that went all the way around the Silver Strand, down the Silver Strand, all the way around the bay and back over to San Diego. So that's how supplies were brought in. That's how the wealthy people came in their own cars. But the trolley that went down Orange Avenue was just back and forth, and it went right down the center of Orange Avenue until 19. I think they took all the rails out in the early 50s, and that's when they planted the trees. So yeah.
Great. If anybody else has any questions, please type them in the chat feature or the Q&A box. Either one will work. That might be it. Give another minute or so.
I'll throw in a few little tidbits while we're waiting.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Ken Kramer, who has his show on PBS, he has a quote attributed to him that Coronado has more history per square inch than any other place in San Diego County. I asked him about that one time. I just wanted confirmation. He says he doesn't remember saying it, but everybody else says he said it. So we're going with that. But, I think there's a lot of truth in that. There is a lot of truth in that. There's so much connection with the early years of Coronado and the rest of San Diego. So many big heavy hitters who lived in Coronado and were businessmen in Coronado also were very involved in San Diego and the development of the exposition. And just, San Diego in general was a pretty small community. So it just really, when pound for pound, inch for inch, Coronado really had a lot of say in a lot of what happened out there. Any other questions, Dean?
None coming in. I guess maybe you covered everything.
Okay, well,
great.
I probably missed some stuff, but thank you for listening. And my book has hundreds of photos, a couple hundred photographs, and it's I tell people it's like reading People magazine. Lots of pictures with captions, but a lot of information in there. And the Arcadia books are generally very full of, they cover all over the country. So I'm very happy to have been able to be part of that.
Great. And we carry your book at the Marston House Museum shop, so anybody out there can come pick it up.
Great, thank you.
And
I think hang on.
Oh.
I had my email up there, but I'm not showing my slide. I'm sorry. I should have put it up there. But if you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me at lhcrawford59@gmail. And I would be happy to answer questions if you have some, or send you in a direction for research. So, but thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Leslie. And thank you to everyone who has joined us for our Penning the Past webinars throughout the year. We'll be back in February with a fantastic lineup of authors for 2025. And thanks again to our wonderful volunteer, Janet O'Day, who helped put this program together. She's been invaluable. Please mark your calendars for Museum Store Sunday on December 1st from 10 to 4 at the Marston House Museum Shop. Along with several of this year's presenters on hand to answer questions and sign copies of their books, we'll also have History Uncovered, the fully illustrated tour booklets from our recent Hotel del Coronado restoration tour, available for purchase, as well as Leslie's book, as I said. And Soho members can enjoy a 15% discount on all merchandise, making it a perfect opportunity for holiday shopping. And if you're not yet a member, you can join right on the spot. Membership includes free admission to the Marston House Museum, plus entry to next year's Penning the Past lectures. And if you missed any of our past lectures, you can now watch or revisit them on the Soho San Diego YouTube channel. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you all at our upcoming events. Thank you, Leslie.
Oh, thank you.